Welcome to Talk Treatises.
Hello.
Today we are doing something a little different. We are dusting off a scroll that is, 2,000 years old?
About that, yeah.
But the questions it asks, they feel like they were written specifically for the age of content creation, AI, and, social media.
It really is startling how modern it feels. I mean, we are stepping into a world that is obsessed with communication, but deeply worried that the quality of that communication is, that it's falling apart.
The text is on the Sublime, or periupsis, if you want to be fancy with the Greek.
A little fancy.
And honestly, this is one of those books that people sort of pretend to have read, or they know it influenced the Romantics, but they don't actually know what's in it.
Which is a tragedy, because it's arguably one of the most insightful manuals on writing and aesthetics ever produced. It's not just about grammar.
Yeah.
It's about the human soul.
So let's set the stage. We are diving into a treatise on how to make your writing, your speech, or even your thinking not just good, but sublime. And I think we need to define that word right away, because today sublime usually means like a really good key lime pie or something.
True. In modern English, it's just a synonym for great. But the author here draws a very strict line in the sand. He distinguishes between the persuasive and the sublime.
This was my first big aha moment in the text. I mean, we spend our whole lives trying to be persuasive. We want to win the argument. We want to convince the boss. But the author says that's actually a lower tier of communication.
Right. Persuasion is an appeal to reason. It's a slow process. If I try to persuade you of something, you have control. You can resist. You can counter-argue. You are an equal participant.
But the sublime.
The sublime doesn't persuade you, it transports you.
It exerts an irresistible force and mastery.
Exactly. When you encounter something truly sublime, you don't evaluate it. You surrender to it. The author uses this incredible analogy. He says, a well-structured argument is like a building. You admire the construction, but the sublime is like a lightning flash.
I love that image. It strikes, and in a split second, everything is illuminated. You see the full power of the speaker instantly, and it scatters everything before it.
And we've all felt that. You hear a line in a movie or read a passage in a book, and suddenly you have goosebumps. You aren't analyzing the syntax. You are just taken. That is the lightning flash.
So this deep dive is essentially a breakdown of how to manufacture that lightning.
Pretty much.
We're going to unpack the 5 sources of that power, the vices that kill it, which are hilarious, by the way, and then we have to talk about the ending. Because the author has a theory about why true genius was dying out in his own time. That is, it's haunting.
It's a diagnosis of spiritual decay that hits very close to home.
But before we get to the doom and gloom, we have a bit of a mystery to solve. Who actually wrote this thing?
Ah, yes.
Because the cover of the book usually says Longinus, but that's probably a lie, right?
It's almost certainly a mistake. For centuries, the manuscript tradition, specifically the Paris manuscript, labeled it as being by Dionysius or Longinus. So scholars naturally pinned it on the most famous Longinus they knew, Cassius Longinus.
Who was a total rock star of the 3rd century AD.
He was a philosopher, a rhetorician, and most famously, the chief advisor to Queen Zenobia of Palmyra.
Zenobia is a legend, the warrior queen who rose up against the Roman Empire.
And Longinus was her brain trust. When the Emperor Aurelian finally crushed the rebellion, he had Longinus executed.
Whoa!
The story goes that Longinus wrote the defiant letters Zenobia sent to the emperor. So for a long time, the Romantics loved the idea that this book on sublimity was written by this tragic, heroic martyr who died for freedom.
It fits the vibe perfectly, but the text itself, it kind of betrays him.
It does. The internal evidence just doesn't line up. The author spends a huge chunk of the text critiquing a writer named Caecilius who lived under Augustus, the first emperor.
Okay.
But our author never quotes anyone later than the early 1st century AD.
So if this was the famous Longinus writing in the 3rd century, he's ignoring 200 years of literature.
Exactly. It would be like a modern film critic writing a book about great movies and stopping at Citizen Kane, just ignoring everything from the last 80 years. It's impossible.
So we aren't dealing with the martyr Longinus. We are dealing with a great unknown author, likely living in the 1st century AD.
During the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. And that context is absolutely crucial for the end of our talk. He's living in a time of benignant despotism.
So the world is safe, wealthy, stable.
And he's writing to a friend, a Roman named Terentianus, trying to figure out why, in this seemingly perfect world, nobody has any high spirit anymore.
It's a world of dilettantes. Everyone knows how to write.
but nobody has anything urgent to say.
Right. So let's look at his manual for fixing that. He starts with a definition that I think is the most quoted line in the whole book. Sublimity is the echo of a great soul.
It's a moral claim as much as a literary one.
Yeah.
He's saying you cannot fake this with fancy vocabulary or clever tricks. If the thought itself isn't noble, the words will just sound hollow.
He sets a really high bar for this. He says that for something to be truly sublime, it has to please all people at all times, which sounds impossible.
It's the ultimate stress test. If you read Homer today, 2,700 years later, and it still hits you, that's the sublime. It transcends culture and time.
But before he tells us how to achieve that, he spends some time roasting the people who try and fail, the vices of style.
Yes.
And these are great because we see them on Twitter and LinkedIn every single day. The first one is tumor.
Or bombast.
Yeah.
Think of a body that looks big, but it's actually just swollen and unhealthy. This happens when a writer wants to seem grand, but just ends up being loud.
He quotes a writer who calls vultures living tombs.
It's so bad. It's grotesque. It's trying so hard to be poetic that it loops back around to being ridiculous.
Okay, then there's puerility, which basically means childishness, but he means it in a specific way.
He means pedantry. It's the fault of the scholar who over-elaborates until the writing becomes frigid, cold. It's trying to be clever and ending up silly.
So the academic who uses a 10-syllable word when one would do just to show off they went to grad school.
That's the one.
And the third one, my personal favorite, is parenthesis, false sentiment.
This is the trap of the modern age. It's displaying emotion where none is called for, or way too much emotion for a small subject.
It's the YouTuber crying an apology video for a minor mistake.
Perfect example. The author says it's like a drunk person crying over nothing. The audience is sober and calm, and the speaker is in a frenzy. It's just awkward.
Right.
True sublimity drags the audience into the frenzy so you feel it together. If you're the only one crying, you aren't being sublime, you're being hysterical.
He actually gives a specific case study of this bad taste with a historian named Timaeus. This guy apparently couldn't help himself when it came to making clever connections.
Oh, Timaeus is the poster child for too smart for his own good. He tries to praise Alexander the Great by saying Alexander conquered all of Asia in fewer years than it took the rhetorician Isocrates to write a single speech.
Which, I get what he's doing. He thinks he's highlighting speed, but it's actually an insult, right?
It's a massive insult. He's comparing the conquest of the known world to writing a pamphlet.
Yeah.
It just trivializes the achievement to make a witty comparison.
And then there's the eye pun. I have to share this because it's so bad.
It's painful.
So Timaeus is describing a shameless person, and the Greek word for the pupil of the eye is kor, which also means maiden or girl.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So Timaeus writes that these people have harlots in their eyes, not maidens.
He made a pun on eye anatomy to call someone a slut.
Yes.
And the author just destroys him for it. He calls it frigidity. It's a cheap trick that lowers the dignity of history. The author's point is that this craving for novelty, this desire to always have a hot take or be quirky, is the root of all these vices.
So the same impulse that creates great art, but without discipline, it creates trash.
Exactly.
So we know what not to do. Don't be puffy, don't be a pedant, and don't fake the emotion. Now, let's get to the solution. The 5 sources of the sublime.
Right, the blueprint. And interestingly, he divides them. The first 2 are innate, you're born with them or you aren't. The last 3 are technical things you can actually learn.
Okay, so source 1, grandeur of thought. This goes back to the echo of a great soul. You need big ideas.
And the example he uses here is fascinating because it's not a speech, it's a silence.
The silence of Ajax.
Exactly. In the Odyssey, Odysseus travels to the underworld and sees the ghost of Ajax. Now, back in the living world, Ajax had killed himself because he felt dishonored by Odysseus.
Right.
So Odysseus walks up to the ghost, apologizes, gives this long, eloquent explanation, and Ajax just turns away.
He ghosts him, literally.
He walks into the gloom without saying a word. And the author says that silence is more sublime than anything he could have possibly said. It implies a dignity and a rage that words would only spoil.
There's another example in this section that really stuck out to me, mostly because of who it quotes. He calls him the lawgiver of the Jews.
Yes, Moses. This is extremely rare. Roman critics almost never read Jewish texts. They stuck to Homer and Plato. But our author quotes the opening of Genesis as the supreme example of expressing the power of a deity.
God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
He loves the speed of it. No elaboration, no flowery description of the sun being knitted together, just a command and the reality. That is grandeur of thought matching the dignity of the subject with the dignity of the description.
Okay, moving to source 2, vehement and inspired passion.
This is the fine madness, the raw emotional energy. And here he makes a really controversial comparison. He pits the Iliad against the Odyssey.
He basically calls the Odyssey an old man's book, which feels like fighting words.
He does. He says the Iliad was written in Homer's prime. It's the noon sun, full of action, struggle, immediate danger. But the Odyssey, he says that's the setting sun. The grandeur is there, but the heat is gone.
Because the Odyssey is weird, right? It's got monsters and witches and lots of storytelling.
Exactly. He notes that the narrative drifts into fables, like the Cyclops or Circe, and into character studies. He actually calls the Odyssey a comedy of manners.
A comedy of manners, like a Jane Austen novel.
In a way, yes. It's about household dynamics in disguise. His point is that when the passion fades, writers turn to character and detail. But true. Earth-shaking sublimity requires that noon sun fire of the Iliad.
Okay, so those two big ideas and big passion are natural. Now we get to the techniques. Source 3 is figures of speech. And normally this is the boring part of English class.
But he has a very cool theory here called the art of concealment.
Right.
This is the idea that a figure of speech is most effective when you don't notice it's a figure of speech. If the audience sees the gears turning, if they see you using a rhetorical trick, they get suspicious. They think you're trying to manipulate them.
So how do you hide it?
You hide it with light. He uses the analogy of painting. Light and shadow are on the same surface, but the light hits your eye first. If the emotion, the light is bright enough, it hides the technique, which is the shadow.
The example he gives is Demosthenes, the Greek orator. Can you unpack that for us? Because the context is everything here.
Okay, so Demosthenes is in a terrible spot. He had convinced Athens to go to war against Philip of Macedon, and they lost badly at a place called Chaeronea.
A total disaster.
So now he has to defend his career. He could have just argued, logically, we made the right choice based on the data we had.
Which is the boring, persuasive argument. I did my best.
Right. Instead, he swears an oath. He says, I swear by those who risked their lives at Marathon.
He invokes the ancestors who fought the Persians and won.
And by doing that, he deifies the ancestors. He implies that the current defeat is equal to that ancient victory because the courage was the same. The audience gets so swept up in the emotion of Marathon that they forget he's using a trick to dodge the fact that he lost.
The brilliance of the thought conceals the figure of speech.
That's it. It's a masterclass.
Okay, source 4 is noble diction, word choice.
This is about selecting the right details. He breaks down a poem by Sappho, the Ode to Anactoria. She's describing the physical experience of seeing her lover sitting with someone else. But she doesn't use abstract words like, I felt jealous.
No, she catalogs the symptoms. It sounds like a medical report. Fire running under the skin.
Ears drumming, eyes going black, cold sweat.
It sounds like a panic attack.
It does. But the author points out that she takes these extreme contradictory symptoms, burning and freezing, sane and crazy, and binds them into a living whole. That selection process, picking the most intense realities and fusing them, is what he means by noble diction.
It's not just using fancy words. It's using the words that force the listener to physically feel the experience.
Precisely.
And finally, source 5 is dignified composition, arrangement.
This is rhythm. He talks about how rhythm affects the human soul, just like music. But he warns against over-rhythm. If your writing is too rhythmic, it sounds like a dance tune.
It becomes a jingle.
Exactly. The audience stops listening to the meaning and starts tapping their foot to the beat. It becomes trivial. The structure has to support the dignity of the words, not distract from them.
So we have the recipe. Great thoughts, crazy passion, hidden technique, perfect words, and dignified rhythm. But the text doesn't end on a victory lap. It ends with a diagnosis. The author asks, why is genius dying?
And this brings us back to the great unknown author living in the Pax Romana. It's a time of peace and wealth. And a philosopher friend suggests to the author that maybe it's the lack of freedom.
The friend says democracy is the nurse of genius.
Right. The theory is that in a democracy, you have to fight with words to win. The friction creates the fire. But in an empire where everything is decided by the emperor, you just have to be polite. So without political struggle, eloquence dies.
Diamonds are made under pressure. No political pressure, no diamonds.
It's a compelling theory, but our author disagrees. He doesn't blame the political system. He turns the mirror around. He blames the war within.
The war inside our own souls.
He diagnoses the age as suffering from two great tyrants, the love of gain and the love of pleasure. He says that when people admire mortal wealth more than immortal goods, the soul shrinks.
He uses that really creepy metaphor of the cage.
Yes. He talks about how the pygmies or dwarfs were kept in cages to stunt their growth. He says our slavery to money and pleasure is a cage that stunts the soul. It makes us incapable of great thoughts because we are always looking down at our wallets, never up at the stars.
That is uncomfortably relevant.
Yeah.
I mean, we are drowning in love of gain and love of pleasure. It makes you wonder, if we are spiritually lethargic, can we even produce sublime art anymore?
He implies that in a wealthy, peaceful society, we become clever, witty, and sarcastic, but not great. We lose the capacity for awe because we're too busy being entertained.
Which leads perfectly into our thought experiments. We like to take these ancient ideas and throw them into the future to see if they break.
Let's do it. And just a disclaimer, these are hypothetical scenarios for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Experiment number 1, the Sublime Turing test.
Ooh, okay.
So Longinus defines the sublime as the echo of a great soul. It requires a noble mind to produce.
Right.
But he also says the result is that the reader is transported.
Cause and effect. The great soul creates the lightning flash.
So imagine an AI writes a poem, and this poem is devastating. It brings you to tears. It feels like a lightning flash. It passes the Sublime test in terms of effect.
But the cause is a neural network, not a great soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do we have to admit the AI has a soul, or do we have to admit that Longinus was wrong and you don't need a soul to create the sublime, you just need the right arrangement of data?
That is tricky. If you say it is sublime, then you're saying sublimity is just a reception phenomenon. It's all in your head. It doesn't matter where it came from, which implies that soul is just a pattern of words we can mimic.
But if you say it's not sublime because it's a robot, then you're admitting you can't trust your own feelings. You felt transported, but you were wrong.
That is the crisis we're walking into. We might reach a point soon where we can't distinguish between the echo of a great soul and the echo of a great data set. That would force us to completely redefine what we mean by art. Is art the feeling it gives you or the intention of the creator?
Longinus would say intention is everything.
It is.
Spooky. Okay, experiment number 2. The cage of comfort.
This plays off the decline of genius argument.
Right. The author worries that love of gain destroys genius. So imagine a Star Trek future. Post-scarcity. Nobody needs to work for money. Love of gain is obsolete because you can replicate anything you want.
Okay, so the cage of avarice is unlocked.
Does that mean we enter a golden age of the sublime? Or without the struggle, without the pressure of needing to survive, do we just become the dwarfs in the cage anyway? Do we just entertain ourselves to death?
That's the Wall-E scenario.
Yeah.
Just floating in chairs, consuming content.
Exactly.
I think Longinus would say it depends on why we are comfortable. If we use that freedom to pursue immortal goods, knowledge, beauty, truth, then yes, it could be a golden age.
But if we just use it to pursue love of pleasure, more sophisticated dopamine hits,
then the soul shrinks even faster. So comfort isn't the problem, it's what you do with it.
it is not the peace of the world that corrupts, but the war within us.
And if the war within ends in a surrender to pleasure, the sublime is dead.
So what is the takeaway for us? I mean, we aren't writing treatises on papyrus. We're writing emails, pitch decks, Slack messages.
I think the lesson is to look at your own work and ask, is there a soul behind this? Or am I just arranging words to sound smart?
And check your vices. Are you being puffy? Are you trying too hard?
But the biggest takeaway is the one he leaves for the end. He says we should write with the heroes of the past as our imaginary judges. Ask yourself, how would Homer listen to this? How would Plato critique this?
That's intimidating. I don't want Homer reading my emails.
It is, but it raises your standard. Don't write for the likes you'll get today. Write for the reader who might pick this up in 2,000 years.
And that leads to our final thought for you, the listener. The text suggests we should ask, how will posterity read me?
It's a terrifying question. If you knew your tweet, your diary, your email was going to be read in the year 4000, would you change what you said?
And if the answer is yes, why aren't you writing that way now?
Exactly. Sublimity is a choice to aim for the immortal.
Something to think about before you hit send. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Keep looking for the lightning flash.
We'll see you next time.